In 2048, there are too many people on Earth, and most of the natural resources have been used up. The government starts a program that will change the genes of 14 soldiers so that they can start a new society on Saturn's moon Titan. These 14 volunteers and their families are moved to their own neighborhood and given high-end houses with the latest technology. Rick, a former pilot, is one of these volunteers. He comes with his doctor wife Abigail and their son Lucas. Dr. Collingwood, who is in charge of the program, has high hopes for Rick's growth because, when he was in the Air Force, he was shot down and had to cross the Syrian desert while hurt and alone for 3 days without food or water. This shows that he is a tough survivor. Rick and Abigail are doing this for their son because they want him to have a future, but Abigail tells Collingwood that she is a little worried that Rick will get very sick. Collingwood says that this could happen, but she doesn't need to worry because Rick will only need the right care afterward. Once everyone who wants to help has moved, they all meet with Collingwood for the first time to start the treatment. First, he gives a talk about the program. He talks about how we've destroyed the planet and how Titan is the only other place in our solar system with an atmosphere and a natural ecosystem. But liquid methane rains into huge oceans and lakes that they can't swim in, and the air is full of nitrogen, so they can't breathe there. It's also too cold for them to live there. So, instead of terraforming, they've decided to change the genes of people so they can adapt to Titan's natural features. One of the volunteers doesn't understand how the bodies won't reject the treatment. Collingwood explains that the clinical trials were successful, but he also says there's no guarantee that everyone will live. Rick stops the volunteer from asking more questions about the program and tells him to leave if he doesn't like it. The volunteers come from all over the world and they were all picked because they have all been through hard times and made it through. After the meeting, they are given card keys so they can go anywhere on the base and are taken to the lab for the first of 300 shots they will get over the next few weeks. Dr. Frey tries to tell Rick what each shot is for, but he only gets half of what she says. From then on, Rick's family has a new routine, but it's nothing special. Lucas goes to school, Abigail takes care of the house, and when she's allowed to, she sits with Rick through his treatments. All of the volunteers become fast friends, and they start to hang out together outside of the base. Since they live close by, they can have dinner parties and barbecues all the time. During these parties, the talk can sometimes get a little dark, like when one of the volunteers says he's afraid that after the 2 years they agreed to spend on Titan, they won't be able to come back. One day, they have a barbecue party where more people drink than usual because this is the last time the volunteers can drink. Abigail feels sick in the evening because she drank too much, so Rick helps her go upstairs. But he is the one who falls because he starts coughing a lot and feels like he can't breathe. Abigail checks on him and sees that he has a fever. She drags him to the bedroom, gives him medicine, tucks him in, and stays with him for the rest of the night. Later, Collingwood is very happy with how the DNA samples from the volunteers are going. This means it's time for a big test. The group is told to stay underwater for a long time without an oxygen tank. After 30 minutes, only Rick and Tally are left, which turns the task into a competition. Tally makes it to 39 minutes in the end, but Rick stays down there. He's so comfortable that he starts swimming in the pool. Everyone is shocked by this because Rick isn't swimming like a normal person. Instead, he's going fast and moving like a dolphin. Rick shows his son this new move in the garden pool in the evening. After that, he puts Lucas to bed, and Lucas surprises him by saying that he thinks his dead grandfather would have loved all this. Then he goes to the pool with his wife to get intimate in the water, but Abigail stops them when she sees black veins on Rick's body. Rick wants to know what's wrong, but the blackness is gone in an instant, and Abigail decides to ignore it for now. A few days later, the first surgery is done on the volunteers. Rayan, one of the wives, comes to Abigail's house so that their kids can play together, and she tells Abigail about some of her worries. She tells Abigail that she is very scared and doesn't think her husband belongs here. Abigail reassures her that the volunteers will save humanity and, most importantly, their children. Rick is in great health after surgery, so he goes back home to keep spending time with his family. Abigail is glad to see that he is feeling better, but she is also worried about the possible side effects she reads about in the instructions they gave them. When Abigail wakes up that night, the bed is empty. Rick is found putting ice on his skin in the kitchen because he is very hot. Abigail gets him a bigger bucket of cold water, and Rick challenges her to a game. Both of them put their hands in the bucket, but Abigail has to take hers out after a few minutes because she can't stand the cold. Rick, on the other hand, keeps his hands in the bucket to prove that he can no longer feel the cold. The next morning, they go for a run together and stop to look at a special spot by the road that has the best view of the area. Rick is sad that he can't save the world. The different experiments are still going on, such as running with masks that mimic the atmosphere on Titan and swimming for long periods of time in water that is very cold. Sometimes a volunteer can't take it and has to leave for the day, but Tally is stubborn and wants to stay in the water even though she can barely stand the cold. Rick shows her how to meditate underwater to help her. One afternoon, when the tests are over and the volunteers are taking showers, Rick notices that he's losing hair. Tally says that it has also happened to her. They hear screams and see that one of the women is having a seizure and puking blood. The doctors rush to help her, but there is nothing they can do to save her. This is the first death in the group of volunteers. Later that day, the volunteers get together to talk about what went wrong. Some of them are also afraid of dying, but the others remind them that they always knew it was a possibility. Even though they shouldn't, they decide to drink to help them get through it. Ryan comforts Zane outside, while Andrew, Tally's husband, helps Abigail in the kitchen. He tells them how they met and how hard he fought to be with Tally until the end. Then Tally joins them and says that Andrew is now very eager to start a family. When Andrew goes to put the dishes on the table, Tally tells him that Andrew thinks she'll leave for 2 years to get it out of her system and become a good wife, but she wants more than that. During dinner a few minutes later, Abigail notices that all of the volunteers' veins are sometimes getting black. Suddenly, they hear screaming coming from the garden. Zane is having a mental breakdown and is attacking Rayan. The other guys run out and hold Zane down until he calms down, while Abigail takes Rayan away. The next day, Frey goes to the neighborhood to give the volunteers extra medicine that will keep them from having the same problems as the dead woman and Zane. Abigail sees that some of the doses are pretty high and wants to talk to Collingwood, but he isn't available. Later in the evening, Rick throws up blood along with his food. Abigail tells him to rest while she cleans, and when Rick isn't looking, she takes a sample of his blood. After that, when she goes around the house to lock all the doors, she finally notices that there are hidden cameras in the house, so that people at the program can watch them all the time. The next time Rick goes to the pool, his skin starts to peel, but he doesn't seem too worried. When they go to bed, Abigail sees that Rick's skin is in bad shape and that he's losing hair, which makes her worry even more. The next day, Abigail looks at Rick's blood under a microscope and sees that it is turning black. Later, the volunteers go through the next big procedure, which is to give them cat-like eyes so they can see in the dark. The surgery goes well, but Rick has to wear bandages on his eyes for a while, and his family has to help him around the house. Abigail hears Rick grunting in pain one night as his eyes start to bleed. They take him to the lab for another surgery, and Abigail goes up to Collingwood to ask what's going on. She tells him that something is alive inside Rick and that she knows about the cameras. Collingwood says he didn't want the cameras, but they were a security order from the Pentagon. He also says that being blind is just part of the process and that he'll be fine in a few days. Abigail thinks he is not telling her everything, so Collingwood sends her home. Abigail goes home and starts to pack some clothes for Rick when all of a sudden she hears sirens. When she goes outside, she sees that the army is all around Zane's house. Even though she can't get any closer, she still sees what happens next. A mutated Zane throws Rayan through the window, killing her instantly. When the soldiers broke into the house, they shot Zane, killing him as well. Later, Abigail is watching over Rick at the base when she hears more soldiers coming. Collingwood will be busy taking care of this mess, so Abigail takes Rick's car key and goes to look around. After hiding in strategic places to avoid security, she goes into Collingwood's office and finds all the files that show the Voluntis DNA is being mixed with animal DNA to create Homo titanians, quote, the next step in evolution. While this is going on, Colonel Solano and some people from NASA are meeting with Collingwood. They want to end the program because it is not proven science. Quote, the volunteers are getting violent, and this is becoming more about crime than space. The last people to do something similar were the Nazis. Colonel Solano wants this experiment to move out of his base, but Collingwood and his advisor say that the ministers of defense have the final say, so they won't leave until they do. Frey tries to tell Collingwood that they should stop after the meeting, but he ignores her. Collingwood goes with Rick home to tell him that his sight will come back in 24 hours. They had overestimated the brain's ability to handle Zane's enhanced senses, so his mind just got too full. A new surgery could fix this, though. Abigail finally loses it and demands to know the truth, so Collingwood finally admits that they are giving the volunteers animal DNA. He can't promise that it will work, so he understands why Abigail is worried, but he also says that they've always known there would be risks. Rick needs to do this new procedure to stay alive. Abigail doesn't like hearing this, so she stays away for a while. The next day, Rick takes off the bandages and makes sure his eyesight is fine. He also shaves his head so he doesn't get bald spots. When night comes, he finds that he can see everything, and he's so impressed that he calls Collingwood to make sure he'll do the procedure. While the families stay at home, all of the volunteers have surgery, but there are many problems, and most of them die. In the end, Rick and Tally are the only ones still alive and well. The next day, Andrew, Abigail, and Lucas go to see Rick and Tally, and are shocked to find that they have become some kind of mutated creatures that can only talk through touch and a low frequency that humans can't hear. Rick puts his hand against the glass that separates them, which makes Abigail cry, and Collingwood giving her Rick's wedding ring only makes her cry more. Tally and Rick are going to Titan in a few days, but they can stay at home until then. Rick has a hard time putting on human clothes, and when Abigail tries to help him, he hits her by accident. He tries to check on her, but Abigail is so afraid of him that she can't help but move away from his touch. Rick spends most of his time in the pool, which is where he feels most at home. After putting Lucas to bed one night, Abigail looks outside and sees Tally walking into the garden with a bloody hand. Rick doesn't seem to be bothered by this, and he walks up to Tally so they can talk through strange tentacles that come out of their fingers. At that moment, the army arrived in the neighborhood and found Andrew dead in the shower. They also start to get closer to Abigail's house, which makes her run upstairs to hide with Lucas. Soldiers shoot Tally with darts that make her sleepy, but it takes quite a few of them to knock her out. But when they get closer, Tally shows that she is awake and uses the tentacles to kill one of them. The others respond right away by shooting at her to kill her. Next, the soldiers try to catch Rick, but his new strength lets him easily knock them out. Rick tries to drown the last soldier in the pool, but Abigail comes out when she hears a noise and stops him. But it's too late, and when Rick figures out what he's done, he runs away. Colonel Solano tells his whole team to start looking for Rick. Collingwood begs him not to kill him because he's expensive research, but Colonel Solano doesn't listen. Abigail and Lucas are taken to the base to keep them safe, but Abigail leaves when she finds out where Rick went. After making sure she isn't being followed, Abigail runs to their special spot and finds Rick there. Abigail puts out her hand to show that she is no longer afraid, and when Rick's tentacles grab her wrist, she kisses him. When they do, army helicopters find them and knock them out. Later, when Abigail wakes up at the base, Collingwood is there with her, telling her that she had to be hurt for her own good. Soon, the Pentagon will end the program, so they need to send Rick to Titan right away. Tally proved that the atmosphere on Earth will either drive these new bodies crazy or kill them. But they can't force him to do it because that could kill him too. Instead, Abigail needs to persuade Rick to go. Then she is taken to see Rick, who is being kept in a glass cage. Collingwood wants Abigail to give Rick a shot of quetiapine, which acts like a chemical lobotomy and will erase all of his memories. Abigail doesn't like this, but Collingwood says it's the only way to make him leave. A soldier gives her an injection with the quetiapine from a drawer, which Abigail drops on purpose to make him pick it up. Then Abigail walks into the cage. After giving Rick a serious look, she gives him the injection, which knocks him out. When Abigail comes out, she asks Freya to come with her, while a soldier goes up to Rick to get him ready for the trip. Collingwood then realizes that Abigail took saline from the drawer where the soldier wasn't looking, and that's what she gave to Rick. When the soldiers start shooting, Rick just runs away and hides in dark rooms where he can see better. Abigail goes to get Lucas, and Freya leads them to a different exit, where they meet up with a badly hurt Rick. Lucas and Abigail hug him again to show that they aren't scared, and Freya looks for medicine, but then all the soldiers show up. Collingwood tells the women that if they don't leave, the soldiers will shoot them all, but Abigail says no. Collingwood is angry and tells the soldiers to shoot, but Solano stands up to him and tells him he won't shoot two women who aren't hurting anyone and a child who has done nothing wrong. Then he points his own gun at Collingwood, and the other soldiers do the same. As Collingwood is being arrested, Abigail runs to Rick's side. Her hug helps him remember his most important memories. Later, Abigail and Freya worked on the Titan II project as researchers, using more moral ways to save the world. In the meantime, Rick is sent to Titan, where he shows that his new body has wings and can fly around his new home.